So welcome to class module 2 of our class on secrets of timing your life. This is the class called New Dimensions in Dasha Analysis. And um, today's lesson is kind of an owner's manual and rules, basic rules for dashas. One of the things, first I'd like to introduce a guest that we have with us, Gary O'Toole. Gary is with Timeline Astrology. He's a good companion of mine. We've had this goal of writing this book on Astro Yoga, combining Ayurveda and Hatha Yoga and Vedic astrology. And it will happen at some point. Gary's writing a book on dashas now, and I invited him to sit in on the class, and he's going to chime in. In fact, I'll even ask him to maybe chime in at certain points of the class when if he has anything to add. And Gary and I met on Facebook. One of these wonderful things that, you start meeting people all around the world on Facebook, and they become good friends. And Gary and I have he's 18 and a half years younger than I am, but we have like Rahu and Ketu at the exact same degree in the zodiac, and we're running similar dasha sequences. Like I think he's in Rahu Venus, and I'm in Rahu Saturn, and so it's kind of my early warning guide. For those of you who didn't hear my other warning before, that beep that you just heard is a fire alarm that is 20 feet above the ceiling that I don't have a ladder to get to. And it means the battery's going down, and it'll chirp every 2 minutes or so. Sometimes it won't chirp for 5 minutes, but I wanted to give my wife some privacy, so I'm staying in my office. So if you hear a chirp, you can pretend it's a bird. It's really just the fire alarm. So I want to introduce the class today. I know we have about 8 people registered for the class, and then the people who are in the transits class, there could be another 5 or 6 people. And again, people are so busy that and the stars have been pretty whacked. A lot of people are listening to the tapes. Today's our first class, and we will be meeting Sunday at 2 o'clock Central Time, which is always a better day for me than Saturdays. There's 2 weeks off. So between now and March 4th, I think I've actually sent you the bonus videos. I did, in my financial astrology course, I did an introduction to all the rules of timing Mahadashas, and you have to know them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of a general overview of special insights into dashas today. And then the next 2 weeks, the next 3 weeks, you've got 3 weeks to watch 3 videotapes that I did on rules of Mahadasha analysis and learn them. And then we'll go over and practice on our next class on Sunday, March 5th. I'm going to be visiting my dad in Chicago next week, and then we'll take off a week for the solar eclipse. And it's probably good that we need some integration time. My good friend Mark Boney is teaching classes like this also, where he kind of sends you a videotape. He allows you to kind of study a lot on your own, and then he comes back and answers a lot of questions. So that's kind of our format for the first week. Week 3 on March 12th is going to be on nakshatras and their influence on the dasha periods and how to use dashas and vargas. Week 4 is kind of a unique part of the class, which is how this kind of class came into being. It's about how to predict 5 levels of dashas. I've been watching my own unfoldment of dashas on 5 levels for about 20 years, and there's a simple way to do it. Most people look at 5 levels of dashas and they get really kind of overwhelmed, but actually everything that happens in our life happens on the 5th level of the dasha. It's the most concrete level, and so it's useful to kind of know how that's unfolding. So we're going to have to learn some secrets of rectifying your charts to the minute or even the quarter minute, which we'll do before that class, so that you can start timing your own levels of dasha. So that's kind of an exciting thing that we're going to be doing. And then the final week is kind of an introduction to Rashi dashas. you know, Vimshotri Dasha is actually very kind of difficult on some levels, and it's, you know, late in my years I've kind of, Rashi Dashas are, the main one that people use is Narayana Dasha, which we'll spend a little time with. It's very good for Rashis are kind of the concrete material level, and Rashi Dashas unfold in sequences of, you know, Aries, Taurus, you know, Gemini, you know, and they kind of unfold through the zodiac. A lot of people have not learned Rashi Dashas because the rules for calculating them are very difficult, and then there are all these controversies about them. But Andrew Foss in Sri Jyoti Star 7 has sorted out all these complicated rules with Sanjay Roth and gotten very accurate timing on Rashi Dashas. And so if you, using Rashi Dashas is actually a whole lot easier than Vimshotri Dasha, but it's, if you get the calculations right from Sri Jyoti Star 5, and Jagannath Hora does some calculations, but they're often off, then you know, it's really easy to see what's going on in your life on these Rashi Dashas because they govern the material level. So, you know, there could probably be a 13-week class on Rashi Dashas, but I wanted to introduce you then because even if we learned some very simple insights into Rashi Dashas, you can see a lot from just looking at what's going on. I mean, for example, in my one of the major Rashi Dashas that I use is Jamini Chara Dasha, which was developed by K.N. Rao, and it's particularly useful because he often didn't have birth times of Indians that were living in the Himalayas, and he would, you know, predict their charts very accurately, you know, using Jamini Chara Dasha. So sometimes, you know, there are some kind of interesting methods to use. So we can't really touch Rashi Dashas, but I want to make you aware in week 5 of you know, that they exist, and that you can probably look them up on the computer, and you can start kind of playing with them and looking at them, and they're worth learning at some point. So that's kind of our class schedule. Again, we're meeting 2 o'clock and 4. Part of let me tell you a little bit about the goals of the class, which I don't have a slide for. One of the things that I want to do is I want to make Dasha's kind of easy. Sometimes people are very kind of overwhelmed by Dashas and all the complicated rules for them, and in some ways Vimshotri Dasha is the hardest one, you know, of all the Dashas in certain ways. And so my goal is to kind of simplify the rules. I mean, I've been looking at them for years, and there are certain simple things that you can get out of them without getting too complicated. And so for those of you who are even beginning students of Jyotish, my goal is to kind of create simple rules and to help you understand how to kind of like hone information from them. And still you kind of have to learn all the rules, which is why I'm giving you my 3 videotapes for you to watch over the next 3 weeks. And you just, you know, as I've pointed out in all my classes, you have to, you know, you have to spend time out of class and put in some work to kind of memorize certain things and learn certain things and then apply it. And, you know, it's really great just to kind of, I'm guilty of that too. I have a really busy schedule, and if I'm taking advanced classes, sometimes I just have time to show up for the advanced class. But if I don't spend time out of class, you know, and integrate the material, I don't really, you know, own it. So again, I encourage you to do your homework. One of the, let's kind of overview what we're going to do today. Of course, everybody knows that, you know, you have to kind of start by learning the basic sequence of the dashas, because the dashas always go in this order based on the series of nakshatras. So we're going to start with, we're going to go in the order in the class of Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, Venus. You know, obviously the sequence starts based on where the moon is in nakshatra. Your moon is when you're born, and so that becomes an important piece of information. So I was born with moon in Jyeshtha nakshatra, and so I started my life in a Mercury period. And actually, even the fact that my life started in Mercury period for Scorpio, Lord of the 8th and the 11th, it shows some important imprinting about what my life is about. 8th house matters and 11th house matters. So, and we'll see when we get to the class of nakshatras that the nakshatra that your moon is in will color the sequence that you go in. So in a sense, my sequence started with the Mercury dasha, my Ketu, which was really a Jyeshtha period, and then my Ketu period was really a Mula period, and my Venus period was a Purva Shada period, and my Sun period was an Uttarashada period. So the sequence unfolds based on where you start, and it's actually, it gives additional information. So we'll learn some advanced information for those of you who are veterans about that in class 3. But obviously, for those of you who are interested, and I'm not going to go, Andrew Foss just published a wonderful book called Yoga of the Planets, and he put a 15-page chapter in the back of the book explaining how the sequence of Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Ketu, Venus was derived, and he goes into the mathematics of the proportions. And for those of you who always wanted to understand the mysteries of why the dashas are these lengths, and why isn't the Sun dasha 20 years, or something like that, you would think it'd be more important. But he was able to kind of, people have been wanting to understand this for years, and Andrew's a brilliant mathematician, and he somehow figured out the math of why it happened. So I can barely understand it. Andrew is such a brilliant scholar that I think I have to read that article about 4 times. I don't think I could ever teach it, but it's for those of you who want to know the secrets of why the dashas are certain years. That's where you want to go to. One of the things I want to start with, which is kind of a simple thing to learn, just something I've kind of just noticed. Let me just take questions real quickly. I'm going to unmute you all. You're all unmuted. So does anybody have any quick questions before we start going into today's material? Again, okay. Okay, so one of the simple things I wanted to start with, which is something kind of I've observed over the years, which I think people probably know but maybe have not noticed, that the dasha and bhukti sequence that you're running, you can kind of describe what's going on in your life, even if you don't know what, if somebody tells you they're in a Rahu Saturn period, you can immediately tell them something about what the nature of their period is, even if you don't know where Rahu and Saturn are placed in their chart, what nakshatras they're in, what aspects are going on. And that's just based on kind of simple subjective pairing. So like I'm in a Rahu Saturn period at the moment, and those of you who know, if you get a Rahu Saturn conjunction in a chart, Rahu and Saturn are both kind of Vata planets. They have the air element. They tend to create a little bit more high anxiety. You have Rahu and Saturn together in a natal chart, they create kind of workaholism, right? Rahu by nature, is kind of a little bit paranoid, and Saturn has a lot to do with the government. And so a Rahu Saturn period by nature might have paranoia about the government about it. Again, and all those things are true of what's going on in my Rahu Saturn period at the moment. Since I went from Rahu Jupiter into Rahu Saturn, I've been kind of a workaholic. I've had a lot more anxiety than I usually do, and I have a lot more paranoia about the government than I usually have. And those are just qualities that come up from what I would call subjective pairings. And that's just because, so if you know what Rahu and Saturn can, relationships do in a natal chart, then you can immediately apply it to the labels of the dasha and bhukti that you're going to and get a lot of information. So let's say you're in a Moon-Venus period. Well, Moon and Venus are very kind of feminine planets, right? So you'd expect that anybody in a Moon-Venus period would probably have a lot of things going on with mothers and women in their chart, of course, just because, that's going on. Or Venus, Moon and Venus are good friends, and so there's kind of a very kind of soft energy for people going through a Moon-Venus period, right? So, and then you get the kicker, you get a Rahu-Ketu period, which is probably the most dreaded period of anybody's life in certain respects, because Rahu and Ketu represent the kind of karmic axis. And so whenever you go through a Rahu-Ketu period, even on a small level, on a fourth level or a fifth level, certainly if you go through a first and second level, life gets really kind of turned upside down, because it's kind of the most karmic period of one's life. And so one can just look at kind of subjective pairings immediately and kind of diagnose what kind of the influences are going on in your dasha and bhukta period, just by knowing what those two planets mean when they're kind of together in conjunction or aspecting each other. And so it's a very simple thing to first learn. So as soon as you meet somebody and they say, I'm in a Mars Rahu period, you kind of can tell them, okay, wow, that's pretty wild. You're probably, having a lot of crazy, anger come up, and a lot of wild, crazy, characters come up in your life and things like that. So, that's a very simple reason to roll. I just wanted to bring it up right away because it's something that you can quickly kind of take with you. Do you have any questions on that very simple rule? What you can do, again, I've recommended Bill Levicy's book, Beneath the Vedic Sky, which I think is the best Vedic book that I know of. And he has a chapter on, if you have Ketu and Mars together, what that means. I mean, there are so many different combinations to memorize, and I don't think you can memorize them all. But I think, if you're ever in doubt, like, what does a Ketu Saturn period mean? We don't see that much. You can go to Bill Levicy's book under Ketu Saturn conjunctions and see what the favorable and unfavorable influences are, and then, that will start to give you an idea of what the energy of that combination is like. Any questions? Okay. Okay. So one of the things, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want you to kind of memorize it on your own. But one of the things that you have to do is you have to go through and understand that all the rising signs, what the good, I never like to use the word good and bad planets are, but because everything in astrology is for our evolution and for our learning. But it's very important that if you don't know all the what are the best planets for each rising sign and what are the most challenging planets for each rising sign, that you have to kind of get your flashcards out. I sent you an email and suggested that you work on this. And I'll go through it real quickly, but I suggest, this first week, if you don't own this material, then to kind of spend some time learning it, because the bottom line is, somebody says, you meet somebody on the street and they say, I'm Taurus rising, I'm in a Saturn period. Well, even if you don't know a whole lot about their life, you actually, Saturn is the Yogacaraka planet. It's the best planet for Tauruses, and that, it will bring good results. So, you have to kind of, you have to kind of immediately know by each rising sign. You meet somebody who's in a Cancer or Leo period, and they say, I'm in a Saturn period, and you immediately say, oh my God, it's a really difficult time for you. And you're going to be right, because Saturn, even if you get a really good placement of Saturn for a Cancer period, Cancer rising, it's going to be tricky. Of course, everything is colored, but it's just good to kind of get the basics down. I'm sure some of you are familiar with these terms. I'm just going to, I have all kinds of people in my class. So the word Marika is usually connected to the second and seventh lords of health. It usually means the word death-inflicting planet. If somebody's in their late years of life, if they go into a Marika period, for Taurus, for Libra rising, Mars is a Marika planet, second and the seventh houses, and so if they're going into a Mars period late in life, there's a chance that they might be in a life-ending period. If what people don't know is you have a Marika period early in your life, it's a challenging period because it'll often bring illness and challenge, but it won't necessarily bring death. But it's just good to know what the Marika planets are for each rising sign. So I'm just going to remind you about that. Yogacaraka is another word I'm going to throw out. I use them abbreviating it Yogacaraka. Yogacaraka planet, as all of you know, is the planet that owns an angle and a trine. So for certain rising signs, like Taurus and Libra, the Yogacaraka planet is Saturn, and for Cancer and Leo, the Yogacaraka planet is Mars. For Scorpio rising, the Yogacaraka planet is the Sun and the Moon. Some people don't kind of realize those two kind of go together. But not every rising sign has a Yogacaraka situation. Geminis actually have very difficult planets all the way around, and even Venus, which is considered one of the best planets for a Gemini, is tricky. So you have to kind of be aware of what are the best planets and what are the worst planets for each rising sign. There's a word that many of you may not know that I use. Is called Bhattaka, and I probably should have put a slide here on that. Bhattaka, I'm always trying to translate these Sanskrit words into English that everybody can understand, because we are English and we tend to remember the English. Bhattaka I'm lately translating as kind of hidden karmic shadow. Bhattaka is something that some people don't understand. For example, the Bhattaka planets for fixed signs, which are Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo, are the ninth house lords. Okay, everybody thinks that the ninth house lord is hunky-dory. It's going to be a great period. But Bhattaka is an example where there's this kind of hidden shadowy karmic problem, and technically Bhattaka isn't really a problem unless it's kind of hit by a couple of malefics, and then it brings out really deep karmic issues. So sometimes you'll get a period for the Lord of the ninth house, and you'll think, oh, it's going to be wonderful, but it may have, if it's really afflicted like a malefic or two, it may bring out a lot of really deep karmic issues. And so you have to be aware of what the Bhattaka planet is for each rising sign, and I'll have a lesson in that in my Vedic psychology course in the fall. But now the chart lord is always good, but sometimes it can cause problems to itself. So even let's say you're in a Mercury period, and you're a Gemini rising or a Virgo rising, sometimes Mercury actually can cause problems to itself, or even a Venus period for a Taurus rising owning the sixth house, or a Libra period for Venus period for a Libra owning the eighth house. Sometimes we get in our own way, that we're our own worst enemy. So, for example, I'm Scorpio rising. Mars owns the sixth. I got Mars in the sixth. My Mars period was actually had its own level of problems, but sometimes I was creating my own illness. But so the lore of the chart may not always be good. So before I go into this, and I ask you to study this at home, so I'm going to go through it quickly. Do you have any questions on anything? Gary, do you want to add anything?
Hey Barry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think I'd just like to also say that it's great so far and I'm really enjoying it, but the one thing I would take from everything you're saying also, or I guess underpin everything you're saying with from my own experience, is that everything obviously has to be taken in context. So whatever dasha someone's experiencing, whatever their ascendant is or lagna is, also has to be looked at in terms of the person. So there's a lot more to a person than just their ascendant sign and how the all the planets work out and how the dashas will therefore work out. So, for example, someone who is just generally kind of the default is to go to a negative space, for example, a Rahu Saturn period is very difficult, even more difficult than someone who doesn't have that sort of affliction in the first place. So that it's just that it's always difficult, but it's more difficult for someone who has that inbuilt, and for someone who doesn't, it's just not as difficult. And so someone has a more positive outlook on life generally. You know, it's not necessarily that they will experience it that bad. And the other thing I would say about the Rahu Ketu, because I've just finished that in the last year, that was one of the best times in my own life. And if you just took the step-by-step analysis of Rahu Ketu in a person's chart without just looking at the very basic principle of how Ketu behaves for each ascendant and how that person behaves based on what's on their ascendant. I think the main thing that you look at to begin anything is the ascendant. So what planet's in the ascendant, what is the ascendant also, of course, and then you can start looking at these steps, because you could scare people very easily, I think, by saying certain things about certain dashas. And I've just learned this from experience. When I say, you know, if I ever said something about a dasha to somebody and they, you know, I've learned the hard way. I've probably created many a sleepless night for someone in their life, because I gave them a general rule about a malefic like Saturn, for example, and yet it may have been an easier time for them than I would have expressed to them. And the last thing I would like to say, I don't want to hold it up, but no matter how hard a planet is for somebody, a period will be for somebody, it's never as difficult as you imagine. So Saturn is fear, it's vata, and it's always worse than the actual outcome. And when an astrologer is interpreting that for you, if I or you, Barry, interpret that from someone, and then they experience it, it's never the same, because it's never from the same angle. It's from my angle or your angle, and when they experience it from their own perspective, it's just so different. Everything is so different. So everything, basically what I'm trying to say is all these dashes are very general, very general.
Right. Thank you, Gary. That's really brilliant, and that's why I'm really glad that you're able to join us today. Okay, I'm going to mute you. So just quickly to kind of go over what Gary was saying too, and this goes back to basic analysis of any chart. You know, sometimes if one of the first things that you look at is if the chart ruler is really strong, let's say, you know, your Scorpio rising and you've got, you know, exalted Jupiter in the ninth or something, and the chart ruler Mars is exalted in the third or something like that. If the chart if the ascendant is really strong, then the experience of going through up and downs is going to be different, and so that's a really important point. And then, you know, and what Gary was alluding to, sometimes, you know, if the sun and the moon are really strong in the chart, you know, sometimes that overrides just about everything else in the chart. And people born near a full moon, you know, where the sun and moon are really kind of strong in the chart, you know, if you know, they can really kind of withstand much, you know, these period influences. And then I guess I would also add that, you know, I think what Gary was saying, which is very true, that you know, let's say, you're right, if you, and I've pointed this out in our transit class, is that if you have a Rahu Saturn affliction in your chart, and you're going through a Rahu Saturn period, then it's a double whammy. So when, you know, we talked about if you get a Rahu Saturn in transit and you're in a Rahu Saturn dasha, then it's, you know, it's particularly difficult. In the same way, in the natal chart, if you have a strong Rahu Saturn affliction, as Gary is pointing out, then a Rahu Saturn period is more difficult than you know, otherwise. So anyway, those are really good points. Helen, this whole thing about Boudica, I know basically the dual signs, which are Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, the Boudica house is the 7th house, which means the Boudica planet, those rising signs have relationship issues that they're always dealing with, kind of just innate within the chart. And then the fixed signs, the ninth house Bhattaka, means that there's some problems with gurus or fathers or spirituality or something like that. And then the movable signs, the Bhattaka, is the 11th house, and they often have issues around friends and income and groups and sometimes health issues, which is 11th house issues. But again, I have a whole lesson on Bhattaka at some point, but I just wanted you to be aware of it, and I can send you an article on it. But it's a good question, Helen. Okay, so I want to go through this material quickly because I know some of you are seasoned astrologers and you know this, but I want you to kind of take time to kind of memorize this because I think it becomes a foundation for analyzing any chart. And again, going back to what Gary said, yeah, the chart starts with, is the ascendant strong? Are the sun and the moon strong? And then, what are the difficult periods for the rising sign? So, so the other thing that we're going to have to go back to is I sent you three intermediate tapes on interpreting Vedic astrology, in terms of, and a lot of that, comes into play. And so we're going to, you'll probably need to go through that again. So just to quickly go through rising signs, the easy way to remember this is usually that, Sun, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter are friends, and Mercury, Saturn, and Venus are friends. And so that's one way to kind of quickly, in your head, kind of start memorizing it. But then there are all these kind of subtle influences that are, you may not think about. And so I'm not even sure I want to go through this, but I want, you've got the slides on this, but basically, you kind of have to be aware that sometimes there's a dual rulership. As for Aquarius, Rahu and Saturn are the co-rulers, and so the Bhattaka planet for Aries, which is Aquarius, could be Rahu or Saturn. I mean, there are kind of these subtle things in there. You have to be aware of the Marika planets. You have to be aware of kind of the mixed influences. And usually the way I remember it is I usually think, okay, Aries, okay, usually Saturn, Saturn and Mercury are the most difficult planets, and Saturn, Mercury, and Venus are the most difficult planets. And none of them, I always think that Mercury is the most difficult, although Venus really is. But anyway, I'm going to let you kind of memorize this, because I think I don't really want to spend the class going through rising signs. But I do want I want you to be kind of aware of, to be able at the top of your head just to kind of really be clear what are the good planets for Aries rising, and then you still have to look at what the coloration is in the chart. Okay, well, the sun is a really great planet for Aries rising because it owns the 5th, but then it may go into the 12th or something. So I mean, as we know, Vedic astrology is always like 100 shades of gray, and what we're trying to do is start out with very simple principles, because eventually you have to hone them down into kind of fine colorations. But we have to kind of start with the simple principles, and the basic principle is you have to really know, the planets for each rising sign and how they kind of impact the rising sign. Taurus, Mars is always the most challenging period. The other thing too, which I think most of you know, is that there's a subjective nature and an objective nature to the planet, to the dasha lord. So Saturn, always feels, so let's say you're Taurus rising or Libra rising. Saturn's the Yogacaraka planet. It owns the 4th or the 5th or the 9th or the 10th. So we always say that Saturn is always a good planet for Taurus and Libra. But if you talk to a Taurus or a Libra, they're going through a Saturn period, subjectively they feel Saturn. And I think I've told this story a couple times in my class, maybe not to this class. I had a friend who was Taurus rising, and she was going into a Saturn period, and she was all depressed. So Saturn was actually fairly strong even. She was all depressed. She says no one, and she said she was out of a job, and she said no one's going to hire me. I'm not going to even look for a job. It's not worth it. And she was just all kind of a pity puddle, and um, and and so subjectively she was experiencing Saturn, depression and like dejection and all these kind of why bother kind of energies. And then, Saturn was very strong in her chart. It was all the ninth. Lo and behold, somebody knocks on the door. She's not even going out looking for jobs and offers her a job. They realize what a great office manager she is, and they say, please work for us. And she gets a great job during her Saturn period for, 10 years. And she thrives at it. But, she was, so the other side of it is that sometimes you get like a Taurus rising. Jupiter is a difficult planet because it owns the 8th and 11th, but Jupiter always feels good. So what happens is, I had a friend in his Jupiter period. He was a Taurus rising also, and he was happy-go-lucky. He was expecting, the world was going to fall at his feet the next, week or two, and everything was going to be wonderful, and he was a happy person to be around. He was in a Jupiter period. Jupiter was feeling subjectively great, but objectively it was not producing good results. So none of the job interviews he went to worked. Things fell apart in his life. All his false optimism, which is what happens for Jupiter, when it's a functional malefic, were negated. So you also have to be aware of those kind of weird relationships. A Venus period for a Scorpio rising or an Aries rising may feel wonderful, but it produces difficult results. Again, I'm talking general principles here, but we have to learn the general principles, and then you have to color it by all the kind of fine tunings. So anyway, I'm going to have you spend time learning this on your own. You just really have to learn all the planets for each rising sign and all the kind of the different things. I kind of spelled it out in writing so that you all kind of know it. But I'm trying to think if there are any weird exceptions that sometimes we have to think about. Here, I just unmuted you. Gary, do you want to add anything about this whole idea of kind of, I know you started off with really a great point, which I missed, and thank you so much. You want to add anything about rising signs and planets and what you've gained from your experience in helping color things?
Um, no, I think the way you're presenting it is really, really good. I mean, like you say, you do have to start with building up this picture, and somebody who, and I know my teacher here in Ireland, Pearl Finn, was always more interested in teaching astrology, for people who came to her than doing a chart reading. And what she wanted them to do, like you're doing now, um, is for them to build up their own picture and to read their own chart. It's always better if you can read your own chart, um, because again, it's just nobody's going to be able to do that as good as you can if you have this language. So you do have to start where you're starting here, and I think it's really important. But just to be aware from the outset, I guess that um, because I've just, in my experience of astrology, and I'm sure you have as well all the time, we all do, it's that knee-jerk reaction to when you read something, in print, and it's like, oh, that's bad, or that's, whatever. Um, and it's, again, all just, has to be taken into context, so and it's never as bad as you would imagine anyway. And the things, that saying how, 99% of the things that we worry about never happen, and it's that 1% that we never imagine that really bowls us over. So it's kind of like we have to be aware of that as well and not get carried away. I mean, for example, if we use the example of Saturn, and if you break down, I don't know if you're going to be doing this subsequently, Barry, but if you break down the dasha itself, and into the 5 different levels, and you see how, even dividing the sub-dash of the bhukti, the second level of Saturn, into 3 different sections, and how each one then plays out on its own. So if somebody has Saturn difficulty placed and it aspects their moon, like a sign aspect on their moon, then this person is kind of more serious-minded anyway. And that's a given for life. That's the way their mind works. But then on top of that, if they also have Saturn aspecting their moon by planetary aspect, that's what gets triggered in the dasha, and it'll be the 3rd section of that dasha. So when Saturn gets kicked in the 3rd section, which basically means the last year of that dasha, so for a whole year Saturn aspects the moon, and then you haven't just got a sort of pessimistic and serious mindset, you've got depression, on your hands if you don't deal with it and remedy it beforehand. So it's kind of like layering it like that, I think, and I'm sure you'd be going through that anyway.
Yeah, great insights again, Gary. I know Gary and I have great synergy. I'm really so glad he came. It was he was in Finland this weekend, and then he said he couldn't come, and then last minute he said he came. He was going to come. I was really thrilled. So those are really great points, Gary. And just kind of to reiterate, I think it's I always tell people that astrology is 1,000 shades of gray. Once in a while you get a clear black and white. You get Saturn in Aries, and it's in a bad house, and it's afflicted by Mars and Rahu, and you can kind of say, okay, God, this is going to be horrendous, and then once in a while you get, Venus exalted in Pisces, and it's a good planet for the rising sign, and it's got, good nakshatra placements and all, it's strong in the Navamsha, and you can kind of say, oh my God, this is going to be such a great period for you. Most of the time, periods are mixed, aren't they? And actually, this is something we'll get to in our introduction today. Like everything in your life isn't bad during a bad dasha period, and everything isn't good in your life during a good dasha period. It's and that, we'll see that in the Varga chart. So if you have, let's say in your Saturn Rahu period, and Saturn and Rahu are strong in your career chart, which is the case in my chart actually. It could be that career goes really well during your Saturn period, Rahu period, but let's say Saturn and Rahu are really badly placed in your Navamsha chart or in another Varga chart, then those areas may come up. So I always like to liken Vedic astrology to reading strands of DNA. I mean, we have to learn kind of generalities. It's like beginning biology. Maybe you learn the basics of DNA strands in your first DNA class, but then reading Varga charts and reading astrology charts is like reading DNA charts, and we're so individual in the way karma is going to manifest. It's so different for everybody, and how we experience it is very different too, which is the whole point that Gary so beautifully brought up, which is that if we got a strong sun and moon, we got a strong ascendant, we're going to get through a lot of things a whole lot easier than if we have a weak ascendant and we have a weak sun and moon, So, really wonderful points. Anyway, so bottom line, learn, let me see if you have any other quick questions or comments. I'm going to, again, ask you just to kind of learn all these slides so that you just immediately know what planets work for everybody, and this is kind of a lifelong experience. Other quick questions, you can type them into chat. You can, you're unmuted. You can come online. Go through this. See what happens. What I've done before in the classes, sometimes I'll go through these basic points that I kind of want you to memorize in the class, and then we don't get to the good stuff. And I don't want to do that in this class. So, so bottom line again with the good and bad is again very relative in Vedic astrology. I think everything that happens to us is for the good and is part of our karmic design. And so I think the goal of any good astrologer is finding a way to help you verbalize why these schools that are happening in your life are are good for your life. I think those of you who've been seeing my articles, I've written about 10 or 12 articles on Saturn, and I'm trying to paint it also in a positive way because, Saturn is not, people fear Saturn so much, and yet, Saturn really just wants you to be responsible and to work hard and to learn how to meditation and take care of your body. And so whenever you're running a Saturn period, if you do those things, you can really thrive. And the bottom line is that people, sometimes are lazy. They don't want to work hard. They don't want to be responsible. And then Saturn kicks you in the butt. So that's every planet has those kind of qualities, and you have to kind of find a way to see the positive side of everything that's happening in your life, and that's something that I try to do in my astrological readings and to point out, and it really, I just to reiterate what Gary said because it's so brilliant. You never want to say something's good or bad to anybody because it's not like that. Life is always mixed. It's always 1,000 shades of gray. Okay, so remember your Marika planets, your Atmakaraka planets, your chart lords, your Bodikas. I'll send you an article on Bodika, and eventually I'm going to teach a class on it, but I think it's totally fascinating, and it really deserves a whole, 2 or 3 hours of information. It really needs about 9 hours of information, but I think it's really important. I think people miss it. Another thing, just another basic point before we go into our guidelines is the Dasha Bhukti of the Atmakaraka. I'd ask you, for those of you, I'd ask you to take my 2 basic classes on Jaimini astrology. And the Atmakaraka is the planet, of course, with the highest number of degrees in your chart, or the lowest if it's Rahu and Ketu reversed. And the Atmakaraka is the planet that governs the soul, and the purpose of the soul planet is to teach you lessons so that you get enlightened. So whenever you're running an Atmakaraka dasha, which is something you have to look for whenever you're looking at a chart, you have to assume that major life lessons are going to come up. And so whenever you're looking at a chart, let's say if your Atmakaraka is Jupiter, the lesson of Jupiter Atmakaraka is that they always need to be a protector of people, and they need to be teaching others. And I find that my wife is Jupiter Atmakaraka, and she's the most amazing teacher, and yet she reneges on her responsibility to live up to her potential as a great teacher, and then she kind of suffers, and then she gets out and she goes and teaches, and she's great. The Atmakaraka planet will show its life lessons during its dasha, and you always have to look for those when you're doing people's charts or your own chart, because they always kind of bring up big issues. And sometimes you go through, if Saturn's your Atmakaraka and you go through a 19-year Saturn period, it's a long period of lessons. But usually Atmakaraka lessons may come up on a smaller level, on a Bhukti level, on the second level. So maybe they're 2 or 3 years, or maybe they're 2 or 3 months. But you always look for them, and you can go back and read those, restudy my Jaimini tapes on Atmakaraka and articles I've written. But I just wanted to remind you about Atmakaraka because it's very important in dasha analysis, and it's very crucial, and people forget to look for it. I'm going to take quick questions again before we move on. Any quick questions? I'm trying to go at a slower pace. I tend to go too fast and have too much material, so that's why I just kind of didn't go over the rising sense, because I just want you to memorize that, because it really is just memorizing it. We could talk a little bit about it a little bit more later. Okay, let's go back to our owner's manual. Okay, I'm trying to get into main points about dasha analysis before we go to our owner's manual. So one of the things that I've tried to kind of, I picked this up from Bill Evesy. I really like the word, he uses the word favorable or unfavorable. I think sometimes I kind of like to use the analogy of a tailwind or a headwind, sometimes we have a tailwind of good karma behind us. We're in a Jupiter period. Jupiter's a good planet for us. Everything we do just comes out right. And those are kind of nice things to have. And sometimes we have karmic buses that are coming up, and we just have a lot of tailwinds and I'm sorry, headwinds rather. Tailwinds are what we want. Tailwinds, headwinds are what we are more challenging. So even favorable or unfavorable may not be the right word. So basic, you know, if you, I want to start really simplistic in this lesson. And Bill Levesey is very good about just saying favorable, you know, if the planet is exalted in its own sign and a friend sign, then it kind of has a favorable influence. And if it's in an enemy sign or it's debilitated or a great enemy sign, then it's kind of unfavorable. And that's kind of a good, simple way to kind of start out when you're quickly analyzing something. Again, we have to start out with simple means of analyzing before we get deeper. You know, planets tend to do better if they're in Kendras 1, 4, 7, and 10, or in trines 5 and 9. So that's kind of a general way of thinking quickly, okay, it's in a Kendra, favorable. Planets generally do well if they're in the 11th house, right? Because, you know, in the 2nd and the 11th house, things gain. Again, these are kind of general things. There are all kinds of exceptions to these rules, but you know, sometimes when you're quickly, my goal today is that if you're quickly looking at a chart, you want to say, okay, what's the rising sign? What are the good planets for it? Where is the planet placed? Is it a Kendron? Is it in a trine? Is it in a difficult, in a growth house like the 3rd house? Is it in a difficult house like the 6th, 8th, or 12th house? And of course, there are all these rules. Malefics do well in the 6th, 8th, or the 12th house, right? So there's all the different colorations, but we have to at least start by thinking, you know, these kind of basic ideas. And then we have to look at all the exceptions and the colorations, but that's for later. The other thing that we're going to do in lesson 3 is that this is something that people miss a lot, and we're going to do a whole lesson on it, is I call it the nakshatra ruler is key. The mental energy of the dasha is ruled by the nakshatra. So this way, Vimshottri dasha, which is connected to where the moon is, what nakshatra the moon is, means that really the Vimshottri dasha is telling us more about our mental energy, how we're feeling about what's going on during a period, and maybe not even about what's physically manifesting. I mean, when you look at Rashi dashas in lesson 5, you see that, like, I'll give you an example. Sometimes you could be making a lot of money because your Rashi dasha is, you know, showing a lot of gains, but you're depressed. You know, you're in a Moon Saturn period. Okay, so and let's say Saturn is in the Moon's nakshatra or something like that, and the Moon's debilitated, something like that. So you get these kind of one of the things that we have to understand is that sometimes nakshatras are really kind of a key for telling us how we're going to feel in the period and what energy is going to manifest. And then the color of the nakshatra is going to be different. So if we're in a Revati nakshatra period, let's say we're in a Mercury period and connected to Revati, we'll talk about those rules later, then Revati is a very spiritual sattvic nakshatra. And so the color of that period, of a Mercury period connected to Revati, is very different than a period connected to Chitra, which is ruled by Mars. And I'm using extreme examples. Chitra is considered the triple tamasic planet, which means it's the most material nakshatra. So if you're running a Mars period connected to Chitra, then it may be an incredible material design for all kinds of material gains, but it may be a spiritually vacuumous period. So what's the color of the nakshatra? And then we have to look at, we'll go into this in our nakshatra lesson, the character and owner of the nakshatra and where the owner is placed. So if let's say I'm in a Saturn period, and my Saturn's exalted in Libra, and Saturn's in Vishaka Nakshatra, which is ruled by Jupiter. So Saturn is channeling Jupiter's energy in my Saturn period, and it's in, you know, Vishaka is a pretty nice nakshatra. So it's channeling a lot of Jupiter energy, and Saturn is exalted. So my Saturn period, and I'm in a Saturn bhukti at the moment. My Saturn period there are a lot of good things about it because Saturn is so strong in my chart, and you wouldn't just say that, it's a terrible period, because it's a Saturn period. So the nakshatra is going to color the quality of the period. And then the house that the nakshatra is connected to is going to be key, and we'll learn this also in lesson 3. So a Venus period for Baharani is different than a Venus period for Purva Phalguni. So Venus, uh, we'll have to I'll send you an article on this. It's quite fascinating. Baharani is in Aries, so Venus is 2 houses. Taurus is 2 houses from Aries, and also 7 houses from Aries. The 7, so Baharani periods are going to be more connected to relationships and money and family than Purva Phalguni period, which are in Leo, which are more connected to 3rd house and 10th house, which means more career in the arts. And you find that to be true. Leo's people connected with Leo, have such kind of an artistic career orientation, whereas Baharanis are very kind of relationship and family oriented. And so the Venus period is going to be different for each one. So we have a whole lesson on this. This is kind of my introduction to the class, but I wanted to point that out to you. And then in lesson 3, we're also going to look at Varga placement. And we have to keep this in mind. Is the dasha ruler strong in the Navamsha chart? If it's strong in the Rashi chart and it's in the 6th or the 8th or the 12th house in the Navamsha chart, it's going to kind of lose a bunch of points, So you always have to look at that. Is the dasha ruler strong in the D9 chart? How strong is it? And again, as I mentioned before, not all periods are bad. Your dasha period may be fine for career and children, if they may suck for relationship and health, or may be terrible for your parents. I mean, so there's not all periods are bad for everything. Once in a while you get something like that, but it's very unlikely. No universal period is bad or good, and life is always a mix. We'll learn a little bit more about Varga analysis and dashas in lesson 3. And that brings us to what we're going to focus on for the next hour, which is what I call Karaka values. Karaka meaning kind of the symbolic level of the sign. So if you're in a sun period, you're going to naturally bring in issues of father and government and monarchy and people in authority and bosses, things like that. If you're in a Jupiter period, you're naturally going to bring in issues with husband and children and gurus and things like that. So you have to kind of be aware of those basic things. And we're going to focus on Karaka values now. I'm going to take questions before I go into this section and see if Gary has any more words of wisdom. Okay, so we're going to spend the next hour going over my owner's manual, and this is kind of based on what I would call Karaka values, which is the fact that if you had to, this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and it kind of forced me to. This class has forced me to do it. Is like, what are the qualities what are the things that come up for people in all sun periods? Not in all, again, Vedic astrology is so individualized because we're looking at strands of DNA, but if, when you're teaching astrology, you have to have some kind of general principle that everybody can latch onto. So this is my way of putting that together. And so that's what we're going to do in a minute. But do you have any questions? I've been talking a lot. Gary, do you want to add anything to anything we've just said?
No, just maybe if you go back at like 2 or 3 slides, just when you mentioned the nakshatras and the position of, you used I think Venus period, for example, yeah, the 3rd one. So in that case, it also obviously depends on what Venus is for the individual. So for example, for Aries and Scorpio, Venus is the partner. So if Venus period comes along, then for example, Venus in Purva Phalguni, for me, for example, it's all about experiencing the arts through my partner. So that's how it works, as opposed to being, myself. Because Venus rules different things. So I think people always forget about that, and even, no matter how much they study astrology, it's kind of like, because it's so easy to get into that sort of general sort of what is Venus generally, but of course what is Venus specifically for Aries, for Taurus, for Gemini, so on. Right,
and that's where we got back to, that's where we got back to our original slide series, which was you have to kind of just be aware of, Venus for an Aries is, his partner, and it's always also a marketable period. I mean, my Venus period was early in my life, and it was the most difficult period of my life because I have a very weak Venus in my chart, and it was I was sick a lot during that period because Venus was a
Mm-hmm.
marka. Now, it wasn't a death period, but it created illness during its period, and I was. But when I look back at that period, there are really valuable things that I learned. Okay, let's get into our owner's manual. Any other questions before we go into our owner's manual? Um, again, you have all the slides for this, Gary. I'll send you a set. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to get them to you before I started class. Um, so let me. That's our bird. For those of you who came late, that's my fire alarm that chirps every couple minutes. Um, it's not your speakers acting up. Okay, so I'm going to go in order. I'm going to start with the sun period, sun, moon, Mars. So I'm going to go in order of the way dashas unfold in our chart. And again, these dasha generalities, these are our generalities, are um, also applicable on level 2 or level 3 of your dashas, or level 4 or even level 5. But I wanted, I wanted to come up with kind of general qualities that you could say about somebody's period. And then, what we have to learn how to do is you have to start with these kind of general qualities, and then you have to color it. Okay, it's in this Navamsha, it's in this nakshatra, it's in the 12th house in the D9 chart. It's aspected by Saturn. It's in a yoga with Jupiter. Okay, so they're all Vedic astrology, as you know, is like you can study it forever. I was trying to come up with some general things that you could just use, and when it really comes to kind of like predicting a period, you have to kind of fine tune it and look at the various strands of the DNA. But so here's our general thing. So sun periods. Okay. So what I did in general with favorable and unfavorable is I tried to put the black and the whites. As I said, there's a lot of grays here, and I can't cover them all, but I'm trying to kind of give you the blacks and the whites. So sun obviously does well in the 3rd, 6th, 10th, and the 11th houses in a natal chart. It's the natural sign of the 5th sign of the zodiac. It does well in the 5th house. When it's favorably, let's say, when it's favorable in a chart, so it's a particularly good planet for Leos and Aries. You look at a sun period for Leo and Aries, it's generally going to be pretty good. And it's, if it's a Leo period for the Lord of the chart, it's the chart load. So Leos and Aries and Scorpios in particular are going to, sun period is usually pretty good. And if it's well placed and well aspect. The next thing you're looking about in the favorable category, this is something we always forget, is the planet aspected by benefics, natural benefics? Is it aspected by Jupiter, a good friend? Then the period really shines. Is it in Jupiter's sign? I have Sun in Pisces, so there's a good connection. My Sun is really strong in my chart because I have a strong Jupiter, and Sun's in Pisces. Then I have Sun in Jupiter's nakshatra, so it's another coloration, a connection with Jupiter. So there are different ways you can color it, but you have to look for these kind of, usually you get a lot of blendings, and sometimes you get black and whites. So I'm giving you some black and whites here. So things that come up in general in a sun period are sun, obviously the karaka for the soul, spirituality, political authority, and leadership. So usually those are keywords you want to use when you're talking about a sun period. Another key word for a sun period, confidence. How are you going to feel if your sun is strong in the chart? It's a good planet for that rising sign. Confidence, independency, actualizing goals, vitality. Sun is the karaka for health. So if the sun's strong in your chart, then those things shine. Good health shine. Confidence is good for achieving your goals. Independence. Sun is always independent. Sun is also good at organizing. Creates leaders, and leaders are good organizers. They organize people. Um, Another thing about a strong sun for us, which if the sun is good in your period, we can say in general, is the ability to honor those they admire. I never really understood why I have this quality. I have the strongest planet in my chart is the 10th lord and the 5th connected to Jupiter. And I always go out of my way to praise people. I learned this many years ago. It's kind of innate in my chart, in my life, that when you praise people, you take on their good qualities. So I always look for the good in people, and I always honor people, and I always admire people, and that energy then comes back to me. And I think I never knew why I had that quality, but when I was doing my research for this um, lesson, I realized that something that strong sun will do. It gives you the ability to honor those that you admire. It's a good quality to culture. Um, focus on the sun period. Focus on the internal being. You know, sun is always kind of it's really one of the higher spiritual energies. Although um, it's why am I on this planet? You know, the soul's search for who am I? Why am I on this planet? Um, Sun periods. The sun is obviously the center of attention. The key rule in dasha analysis is that you always rotate the chart around the dasha period. So I forgot to put this principle in the slideshow, but um, so always, if a person's in a sun period, read the chart from the sun. So the sun goes in the first period, the first house, which as you know is a double-edged sword. The sun is the king, and everybody always tries to take down the king and behead the king. And it's what's certainly going on in the U.S. government at the moment. Somebody gets into power, they're destroyed. And so the sun in the first house is always kind of a problem because people are always trying to take you down. At the same time, people are very attracted to the sun, when it's strong. So you naturally garner leadership and attention. This is something about our society. Sun develops a sharp, intuitive mind, respect, freedom, creativity. Um, Obviously, the sun will bring up issues around father and government. Living in wooded areas is one of the karakas for the sun. Sun in Ayurveda is connected. Sun is connected to heart and eyesight. So the sun is strong. The heart's going to be strong in that period. If the sun is weak, the person may develop problems with their eyes or their heart. Sun is the karaka for heart. Sun is obviously a pitta planet in Ayurveda. So when it's afflicted, it creates high fevers, weak heart, ulcers, poor vision, heart attacks. I was trying to come up with an affirmation for each period, and I'm still going to probably refine this over the next year, but I came up with a good one for the sun here. My eternal flame lights the way and leads all out of darkness. I lead with generosity, inspiration, and honor all those around me. So to me, that's kind of, when the sun's strong, that's kind of our goal, and that's kind of the goal of that period, to kind of light the way for others out of darkness, to lead them with generosity, inspiration, and to honor them. And I think when the sun's strong in a chart in a sun period, that kind of naturally happens, and that's why we look up to CEOs and leaders who have strong suns, because they have that ability to inspire us, to lead us out of the light through the brightness of the sun. So when the sun's unfavorable in a chart, so I'm giving you the extremes here. There's a word, we learned this in Jaimini astrology, called Mahadasha. I think it's Mahadasha, isn't it, Gary? Did I abbreviate MKS? Hold on. I was spacing on this. Isn't it sometimes called MKS, Mahadasha?
Yes, Mahadasha.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I abbreviate this MKS. I'm going to give you somehow okay, Marika, this is an important concept to remember. It's the opposite of Digbala. Digbala is where a planet gets its most power. So the sun is most powerful in the 10th house. It's the place of career and status, right? So the opposite of Digbala which sometimes isn't taught in Vedic astrology, is called Mahadasha, and I abbreviate it MKS. So Mahadasha for the sun is in the 12th house. The sun wants to shine, and when it's in the 12th house, it's hidden from view, and people don't see it. So when you get people with sun in the 12th house, um, they're very frustrated. They want to show up, they want to be recognized, and no one sees them at work. I just had a client like that, and she's got sun in the 12th, and she just, she's not getting the raises, she's not getting the recognition at work, and she keeps saying, well, what can I do to get the recognition at work? And I have to give her remedies for letting her shine. But that's, so sun, one of the unfavorable positions of the sun, at least to me, the most difficult position of the sun is to put it in the 12th house. And obviously, if it's debilitated in the sign of Libra, it may be good at relationship, but then it has problems. The sun, if the sun is aspected by enemies, particularly by Saturn, by Rahu or Ketu, then the weaker qualities of the sun come out. So when the sun is a sun period, when you have an afflicted sun, again, I'm playing black and white here. Everything is gray. We have blocks to expressing power and strength. And so the sun period for a person with a debilitated sun is about wanting to express their power and strength and to shine, but being blocked. And then another word you could use, certainly if the Rahu and Ketu are involved, is being eclipsed from fulfilling one's goals. We said a strong sun means you can fulfill your goals. A weak sun, is sometimes you're eclipsed and blocked from fulfilling your goals. When the sun is weak, obviously it creates arrogance, boasting, condescension. We kind of hate people with a weak sun because, those are the people that we want to tear down because there's too much ego there. The ego's out of balance. The king, the best leaders are those that kind of work in the trenches with the people. It's something I've learned in my volunteer work. If you want to be a good leader, you actually get in the trenches and work with your people. You don't sit there and dictate, And the bad king is the arrogant, boastful, condescending king that dictates and tells everybody what to do, rather than get out there and work with his people to make things happen. Watching the Masterpiece Theater series Poldark, which is really wonderful if you haven't seen it. And Poldark owns a mine in the series, and he's the mine owner. I mean, but he goes down there and works with his people, cracking at rocks. He's always taking care of his people. He's a leader. He's working with his people, and that's when the sun is strong. When the sun is weak, the boss is in his office, making people wrong and telling them what to do. Sun period again dislikes employees. When the sun's weak in a chart and in a sun period, creates power hunting, overspending, pompousness. And sometimes when the sun is weak in the chart, the person is so overrun with his career that the only thing they care about is career, 10th house, 10th house, 10th house, and the rest of their life kind of gets out of balance. So those are some of the general things one can say about a sun period, favorable or unfavorable. Gary, do you want to add anything? Does anybody want to add anything from their own sun period I'm trying to create kind of a general guideline for you because we have to start with the general before we get specific. But there are very few books that kind of really try to do this, and that's why I have to kind of synthesize some of it. Gary, anything?
No, I just think it's very well synthesized, and you're given both sides, and people obviously know from listening to you that there is a whole section in the middle. It is a spectrum, and of course you're going to feel and experience at times the full spectrum. So if somebody even starts off at the extreme of one end or the other, if somebody's got an exalted sun or a debilitated sun, afflicted or whatever, they can also experience the highs, as well as the lows. But if, for example, if the sun represents our connections to our higher self, that is the ultimate expression of the sun, and that confidence that comes from that is unshakable, whereas the confidence from doing a good job or succeeding in something, something else is of course shakeable, and then you can fall from a height if you build yourself up too high, especially if you're born with a weak sun. This is the thing. If somebody has a weak sun, it's not in their nature to be an exalted sun. But what they want to do is balance that, and vice versa. So if the issue is confidence, I see it as the issue is confidence, whether it's having confidence or not having confidence. That's what the sun represents.
Right. That's great. Very well put, Gary. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the moon so we can get through all our periods. Okay. So let's get to the moon. So again, favorable moon, moon in Cancer. There are all kinds of different colorations, but the most extreme examples: moon in Cancer, moon exalted in an own sign, moon in Taurus exalted, moon connected to the fourth house. Obviously, fourth house is Digbala for the moon. Moon is home, mother, happiness. Moon in the fourth house, mother is at home. Moon in the fourth house is one of those. Fourth house is the house for Karaka for happiness. Moon is connected to happiness. If the moon's in the fourth house, then everything's great. Moon goes in the 10th house, then we're at work. We want to be home. It's the opposite. So when the moon is strong and you're a favorable moon period, love of home and family, you're a good parent to all, particularly if you're a female, you're a good mother to all. You have moon is a very imaginative planet. It's good. It's the second most important planet for artists after Venus. Great imagination. Little kids, are ruled by the moon, and they have great imagination very naturally. Moon is connected to listening and intuition. So when the moon is strong, and in your moon period, in a strong moon period, you're going to be a good listener. You're going to be intuitive. I've got a debilitated moon. I'm a terrible listener. But that's just what you need to kind of remember. Moon obviously is living a life of compassion and kindness and is loyal to one's partner. Compassion is always a good word to remember with moon and moon period. So I think people with a strong moon period are going to be inclined to do service work and to help others because they feel a lot of compassion and kindness to helping others. Moon is the cosmic mother, protects the individual and material existence. Um, um, my wife is like that. She's got moon in Cancer and in Pusha Nakshatra, and she's just, whenever she's in charge of a service project, people always say at the end, they say, oh, I just felt my mother was there taking care of me. The cosmic mother is just there making sure that every material need is taken care of, and that's the positive quality of a moon period. Strong moon promotes deep thinking and emotional nurturing. Desire to explore the meaning of existence. That's something that I usually don't think about. In my research, I came across that. But the sun and the moon are the two most important planets in any chart, and when they're strong, everything works in the chart because they govern the soul and the mind, and the higher mind, and so when the sun and the moon are strong in the chart, then we have that deep desire to find out what the meaning of life is. Why am I here? Strong moon period, graceful. Strong moon period. Moon is intuitive. It's psychic. It expands consciousness. It's very sensitive in a positive way. So those are qualities that come out in a moon period. Obviously, moon is very connected to love. And people always say Venus is connected to love. I always think that the moon's more important for love and is more a deeper connection of the heart. Um, Put moon in the first house, and you have somebody who wears their heart on their sleeve. So there's a fullness of love when moon is very strong. Steady emotions, patient, comfortable, thankful. So again, those are the qualities of the moon. But in the moon period, if the moon's strong, then the whole period exudes kind of that energy, especially if it's not afflicted. Again, we're here on this planet to evolve, and so you look at any chart, you're going to find some affliction. It's going to be in a bad nakshatra, it's going to be in a bad nivamsha in the D9, it's going to have some obscure yoga that's bad for it. But that's the nature of life. But we're kind of painting black and whites here. because then you have to fill in the grays, and that's the whole art of astrology. So my affirmation for this good moon period, or for the moon period in general, is: I nurture and am compassionate and kind to all I encounter. I observe all the mental nonsense of my mind and remember my unchanging nature. One of the things that I want to talk about too is um, the moon is so important in the Vedic astrological system. I mean, I think less so for Westerners, but still everything happens in our mind. If our mind is at peace, if our mind is working and it's not filled with fear and all kinds of crazy thoughts, then we can survive. I mean, when the moon's afflicted in somebody's chart, and if other things aren't there to balance it out, then their mind is all over the place, and their emotions are all over the place. And to me, what I try to teach people in my spiritual work is that most of the stuff going through our mind is nonsense. I really learned this from Eckhart Tolle, that like you said, 90%, 99%, what Gary is saying, of the thoughts that come through our mind are really just garbage, and we just have to remember that they're garbage. And if you're in a weak moon period, then you're more likely to have a lot of garbage, and so you've got to remember the nonsense of the mind. So the unfavorable qualities of the moon. The worst place for the moon, I'm going to call this is the eighth house, which is called Mahadasha. And just remember MKS. Just remember it's the opposite of Digbala. So Digbala, the moon, is strong in the house of happiness, in the fourth house where mother is at home. In the eighth house, the moon is hidden from view. The moon is Marka Kanastana, which means usually with people with moon in the eighth house is that these people have very oppressed emotions. They can't let their feelings out. They sometimes can't even feel them. They may have dry emotions. And if the moon is an extreme example of a problem moon is usually when the moon is connected to Saturn, Mars, Rahu, or Ketu particularly, and when it's waning, or when it's dim. New moons are particularly difficult. And James Rahu was really important for pointing that out to me. People born with full moons have really strong souls, and it means they can get through everything in their life. And people with new moons, depending on what house it is, they tend to have more problems dealing with everything. So as I said, obviously moon in Scorpio is obviously has dry emotions, or um, moon in Aquarius or Capricorn. Saturn signs I think is particularly more problematic than any other sign, although there might be some other placements. But I think of all the rising signs, those are the three that kind of are more black than white for me. So when the moon's weak and if the moon's weak in your chart, then in the moon period there's a feeling of restriction, feeling emotionally miserable or forlorn, overly dependent, clingy, dry emotions, hoarding, hypersensitive, moody, a worrier. Worrier is a kind of a key word for an afflicted moon, especially by Saturn. Self-pitying, abandoned, another afflicted moon, tending to pick dysfunctional friends and partners. In Ayurveda, when the moon is weak, it's the disease of coldness, so it tends to create lung problems, thoughts problems, nervous and emotional problems, moodiness, depression, insomnia, lack of peace. Peach, that would be nice. No peaches. Excessive mucus. I think it's good to learn the Ayurvedic qualities. You can pick up Dr. Ladd's book on Ayurvedic astrology, and he talks about, that's where some of this comes from. I think what happens is when you're going through a period, my wife, for example, is in a Mars period, and she's Libra rising. Mars is a difficult planet, and Mars is conjunct the Sun within 2 degrees, luckily in the 3rd house, but it's still a problem. And she's in a Mars period, and we went to the hospital. She was having chest pains. We did all these heart scans. Her heart was fine, and they didn't diagnose the problem. And I'm thinking, okay, she's in a Mars period. Mars governs gallbladder. It's a weak Mars. She's got gallbladder problems. So we sent her back to the doctor, and she's still having pain, and and they're finding gallbladder problems. So I think it's good. The problem of the organ will come up in the period. So I think it's good for you to know some of the basic Ayurvedic problems, especially if the planet's weak. Um, okay, before we go to Mars, um, let's take some questions. As always, I prepare too much material and fling it all at you, and that's my Jupiter K2. I'm sorry, I just encyclopedic, and then I try to cut it down. And I don't know what to do because I don't think anybody wants to take a 10-lesson class. Gary, any thoughts on Moon?
Just the one thing I notice again and again is when people analyze the chart from an Ayurvedic perspective, and they're not seeing the Prakriti, the constitution is not Vata type, and yet you see an affliction to the moon, and perhaps it's a new moon, and so on. So it's a more, for example, if it's a disturbed mind, and so you hear, I've heard expressions from people who are, oh, I've got a kapha body but a vata mind, so you'll hear that from clients who know a bit about Ayurveda and who are having readings. So that's always interesting, of course. So you have to look at it from it's kind of it's a multi-dimensional thing. You can't just say, oh, if you're a Vata type, you're the only type to ever experience anxiety or depression. So the moon is a huge, like you said, a huge thing in the chart. How we feel is more important than what's happening in our lives, really.
Good, good. Any other questions before we go to Mars? Everybody loves Mars, I know. Gary and I love Mars. We're Scorpio rising, although we're both ruled by K2. So, but we know Mars well. We both have strong Mars. Okay, let me put you on mute. Okay. Mars, the warrior. So, again, I'm painting blacks and whites here. So Mars is particularly strong, exalted in the sign of Capricorn and its own sign of Aries, or Scorpio. It's particularly happy in Leo because it's, it's a good friend there. If it's aspected by friends like Jupiter, or if it ends up in the 10th house, those are the extreme examples of a strong Mars. So I think Donald Trump has Mars in the 10th and Leo or something like that. It's just really strong for career and battling and things like that. So when Mars is strong, and this would mean favorable Mars period, inner vitality is gushing for objective expression. So Mars has this, we see Mars we love athletes, right? Because athletes, are just, they put 100% into kicking a ball across the field, and it's just somehow people will spend millions of dollars to watch that because we love seeing that Mars inner vitality gushing to express itself, athletes are the biggest, and warriors are the biggest expression of Mars. Mars governs creative initiative and dynamism. I always forget. I think one of the things that we forget about Mars and a strong Mars is that it's very creative. It likes starting things. I mean, Aries, the start of the zodiac. As soon as Mars goes into Aries, you just kind of gush forth with new initiative to start new projects. We'll see Mars going into Aries March 1st. And we forget that a strong Mars is so good for like being a starter, a self-starter, and getting things going. When Mars is weak, you have the opposite problem. Mars, desire for growth, movement, change, fresh karma. Well, Mars likes to move. It likes to act. Mars is connected to military science, of course, the mechanical engineering, geology, scientific discovery even. Those are things that could happen in a Mars period if Mars is strong in the chart and it's connected to maybe career houses. Also of interest on a spiritual level, attaining high yogic cities is something that happens with Mars, leading to rewards. Actually, this happened in my life. I have a very strong Mars in my chart, and I actually was initiated into Patanjali's cities, and had some amazing experience with that. But um, um, something I discovered in my research. Full of Mars, full of initiate, loved of adventure, childlike. Mars is the immature adult. It's Mars represents adolescent youth, and so when Mars is, if you look at adolescents, they have all this kind of love of adventure and getting out there, but there's also a lot of childlike joy in that expression, and I think parents sometimes repress that, and I think if you repress a lot of Mars when in the teenage years, then your kids just don't really learn how um, to take risks in their lives. So my affirmation for Mars is, I surge into new action with great joy and dynamism and provide the highest service for humanity. I avoid being reckless and selfish or projecting my anger in a destructive manner. Mars, of course, governs, the highest aspect of Mars to me is service. I mean, the military is all called the service. Mars governs, the highest aspect of Mars is service to the king, service to the country. Mars will devote his life and sacrifice his life to help other people. And I think when Mars is strong in a chart, you find people that are willing to lead, do service work in charitable organizations. And if you see Mars strong in a chart and then they're in a Mars period, that's something you want to encourage them to do. Or what happens is you find that Mars is not strong in a work, and then you actually encourage them to do service work because they need to build that quality which is missing in their life. So Mars period unfavorable. Again, I'm giving the black and whites here. So Cancer, sign of debilitation, is particularly bad place for it, but not for everybody. Mars aspected by Mercury to me is the most challenging aspect. Saturn and Rahu and Ketu, of course, come in there. So when you have Mars, those aspects are always particularly difficult for Mars. Mars in the 7th house is Mahadasha, MKS. I can't pronounce that. It's not rolling off my tongue here. MKS. Marna Karaka Sthana. Okay. It's the opposite of Digbala. So Mars is really happy in the 10th house where it gains status. It really does poorly in the 7th house where it destroys relationship, and where ego takes over and brute force takes over in relationships. So Mars in the 7th house, always where you don't want to see it. Combust Mars, Mars combusts the sun, I always think is a real problem too. We'll get that this summer with Mars in Cancer in the summer, and watch for a lot of rioting in Europe and the U.S. We have a powder keg growing up anyway, but what happens when Mars gets angry and gets combusted by the sun? So watch out this summer. Mars, when it's weak in a chart, in its period, it's going to bring out animal passion. I mean, this is where you get, people that get violent and get involved in difficult things like, rape and bullying and things like that. Mars, when it's weak, creates reckless change leading to loss, suffering, injury, accidents, warlike engagements, and explosions. So if you see a weak Mars in a chart, and it's bad for the planet. Let's say, to me, Virgos have the most problem with Mars. It owns the 8th house, and if Mars is really afflicted in the 8th house and they're in a Mars period, they really have to be careful with accidents and injury and things like that, because those are more likely to come up. For Virgos in a Mars period if Mars is weak in the chart. Dark side of Mars, again, agitation, outbursts, bloodshed, abortion, impulsive sexual advances, destructive thinking, hostile relationships, ligations. I was at a conference and I was thinking, well, what's the worst malefic? And people always think Saturn, but it's really Mars because of these qualities. When Mars is afflicted, it just gets very destructive. Mars governs war, and you get these people thinking they're going to overpower some country, and millions of people die because somebody's ego thinks that they have to run the world. Mars, when it's weak, becomes, instead of being service-oriented, is selfish, self-centered, sexual conquesting, uncooperative, cheating to get results, arrogant, reckless, things like that. None of these are very good. Now, the truth of the matter is that you rarely, I rarely find people in charts that I do with a really bad Mars that have these qualities. But if I were doing charts in the criminal justice system, I would probably find a lot of these really bad Mars. But most of the people I do charts for, I don't see that. But it's just good to understand. We're doing black and whites today. It's usually there's a gray. Ayurveda, Mars is connected to bleeding, surgery, acute infection, liver and gallbladder disorders, toxic blood, venereal disease, strokes, and heart attacks. So um, um, if somebody's in a Mars period and Mars is weak in their chart, Mars is a bad planet for them, like, for a Virgo, um, or a Libra particularly, you've got to make sure that they're on top of their liver and gallbladder, or that they're, on top of these type of things. Okay, questions about Mars, Gary?
I think, well, I could talk about Mars all night, but as you're talking about the first like great malefic, the first malefic you've gone through here, even being exalted. I mean, being exalted is actually, perhaps even more of a problem if it's also afflicted. I've seen it in many charts where someone has an exalted Mars, and if you just read it as exalted, you think, oh, great. But that same person would have had a nervous breakdown, for example, because Mars rules the nerves. So if somebody has a strong Mars, they can hold their nerve. Or somebody um, insult someone saying, oh, she or he's got some nerve. That's somebody with a strong Mars. But if it's too strong, of course, then that's too much. And if it's weak, it's a problem as well. And of course, retrograde is the other key thing.
Right.
When you're talking especially about malefics, and or any planet, when it's retrograde, it creates more of an unfavorable, I guess, scenario. But it would definitely be, yeah, perfect, retrograde, unfavorable for Mars, because Mars is, like you say, that impetus to push everything out, and when it's retrograde, you can't get it out, and you might overdo it when it builds up inside. So it's not balanced in any way.
Good points, Gary. Yeah, I had a lesson, which, if you haven't seen it, was retrograde. Retrograde planets, exalted planets, debilitated planets are often really misunderstood quite a bit. And I used the example of I have a friend he's a Sag rising, he's got an exalted Mars in the second. And I think it must be afflicted, I'm trying to remember it. And he has the foulest mouth of anybody that I know, just swearing at the top of his head. And he had a huge, Mars on the 12th for a Sag rising. And you might look at the chart quickly and say, oh, exalted Mars must be, really great guy, something like that. But the guy had a serious medical issue and connected to Mars, and it was particularly because Mars was exalted. It was causing more harm. So I'll have to send you those tapes on retrogrades and exalted if you haven't heard that material. But very important. Let's move on to Rahu, our favorite Rahu. We love Rahu. I'm in a Rahu period. I think Rahu gets maligned. Gary and I are both in Rahu periods. Um, so Rahu is exalted in Gemini and Taurus, and it does particularly well in the 3rd, 6th, 10th, and 11th houses. And it particularly does well if it's aspected by Jupiter, Venus, or Mercury. So those are favorable qualities of Rahu. Rahu is about ambition, experience, growth, creative, artistic expression, material success. One of the things that people don't understand, Rahu gets a bad shrift in the traditional Vedic text because Rahu is the outsider, the outcast, the migrant, right? And so Rahu, the Vedic society doesn't like the outsider or the outcast because they're very traditional in that way. But Rahu, is the rebel and is very creative. I find that artist charts always have a strong Rahu. And, we look up to artists so much. So sometimes you put Rahu in the first. I mean, you get these rock stars. They're just incredible creative artists, and, we worship them, and, they have miserable lives also. But Rahu gets maligned because it does govern this kind of creative artistic part of our soul. Rahu, it brings the ultimately brings the latent jewels of one's personality into one's depths. You know, Rahu periods are Rahu and Ketu periods are the most challenging because they really bring up our karmic depths and they create lessons for us so that we can grow. And and they're never very easy. I mean, I do know people that can go through good Rahu periods and they have lots of material success. Rahu's in the 11th in Gemini, and then toward the end of the period, you know, things break down. I mean, Donald Trump was very successful in his Rahu period. Rahu can bring incredible success, but it doesn't ever bring peace because Rahu is always wanting more. It's not enough. I mean, Rahu's mantra is more, 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 and the affirmation has to be, I am enough, I have enough. You know? So that's what we have to learn in a Rahu period. I am enough, I have enough. Because otherwise you're never happy. I mean, the whole idea of Rahu is the carrot on the string, and so Rahu never has enough. You have a million, you want 10 million. You have 100 billion, like Donald Trump or something. He probably wants $1 trillion. Who knows? But that's the nature of Rahu. Never enough. But Rahu periods can bring unexpected opportunities for enjoyment, luxuries, friendship, honor from the state, recognition. I mean, Rahu, to me, one of the key words I use for Rahu, which I don't see in the books, is charismatic. When you're in a Rahu period, again, you rotate Rahu into the first house. I think Rahu creates a lot of charisma, and I think people are attracted to charisma. I mean, you go on TV. TV is all Rahu because the people who, they pick for TV, always have strong Rahu. They just are magnetic personalities, and we're attracted to that, even though there's a dark side to it. All these people have really kind of dark lives on some level sometimes, but not always. But it at least creates outer magnetism, which can be good for success. It creates success in our life if Rahu is well placed in the chart. Main lesson of Rahu periods: gaining material success so individuals can learn attachment. Rahu will give you a lot of material success, and then you'll be still feeling like it's not enough, and then you start searching for God. I often find at the end of a Rahu period, it's traditionally thought, although not always, that people peak in Rahu Venus period, and then they go into Rahu Sun Moon Mars, and the soul's torn apart, and they often lose a lot of status and a lot of things, and it's not something that you can always say, but Rahu kind of gives and then it kind of takes back, and it's if we haven't learned our spiritual lessons, that I am enough, I have enough, I give. So gaining material success so individuals can learn detachment. Learning the futility of the material world is the big lesson of Rahu. So my affirmation for Rahu: I convert my suffering into divine manifestation. I adapt and accept the changing nature of my karmic situation. Rahu has to adapt and accept that life is filled with ups and downs. Rahu periods create ups and downs. We have to kind of roll with it, we get so caught up, I'm king of the world, and then suddenly Rahu will take it away from you. So I learned the divine wisdom from every situation. I learned detachment and understanding from the ups and downs of life to understand my own eternal nature, my own inner nature. So Rahu is ultimately a very spiritual planet because it's teaching us to move beyond the material to our own divine nature. So when Rahu is afflicted, though, it's more of a problem. So Rahu is in Scorpio and Sag is considered debilitated. It could be uplifted by Jupiter. If Rahu in the first, second, fourth, fifth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 12th house is more problematic. Some people think the ninth house is okay, but I think it destroys relationships with spirituality and gurus and stuff like that. When Rahu is aspected my malefics or malefic signs or stars connected to Saturn, Sun, Moon, or Mars, it's particularly bad in the ninth house. So our MKS position for Rahu is in the ninth house, Marna Kanastana. Rahu, this is why the Vedic culture hates Rahu, because it destroys the ninth house, which is religion's traditional spiritual values, gurus. It tears down gurus. It tears down religious. It seeks to kind of change outmoded realms of society. So Rahu is an unfavorable Rahu period is unconstrained forces that were out of control. So what happens is, Rahu traditionally is it's just a head. It just craves and craves and craves. It wants more and more and more and more. It's totally out of control. It will do anything for power when it's connected to the sun, or it'll crave, it'll crave, whatever it craves. It just will do anything. It wanted to be immortal, so it drank the soma, the nectar of the gods, so it become an immortal planet. And in the process, it's immortal, but it has to suffer also in eternity. Rahu periods are always connected to the karmic aspects that are tinged with dissatisfaction, never enough, never enough. Rahu periods often lead to, when it's afflicted, if it's afflicted, but Rahu isn't always bad. I mean, I have a strong Rahu. It's aspected by stationary Jupiter. It's saving my life. But a lot of people if you don't find spirituality in your Rahu period, you have a Rahu period in your teenage years, you can easily predict, drugs, addictions, foreign travels, loss of fears and phobias. Rahu, obviously, the planet of addictions. Sorrow, Rahu periods are going to bring, a weak Rahu period, particularly connected to the second house, will bring addiction. Sorrow, frustration, depression, dejection. Again, it's very connected to Saturn, so it really can bring up very kind of difficult energies when it's afflicted in a Rahu period. Rahu has to learn to recognize boundary. That's one of the major lessons for Rahu. I mean, Rahu has no boundaries. It just wants to eat the nectar of the gods, and it's going to get whatever it wants and do whatever it takes, break the law, become an outlaw, and get whatever it wants at whatever cost. And so, if you have a weak Rahu in a chart, you've got to learn to recognize your boundaries and not to violate societal norms. Rahu periods can be psychologically intense when it's afflicted. Loss of prestige can happen, mental anguish, theft, loss of wealth, abandonment, bereavement, disappointment. So you have to be careful. If you have an afflicted Rahu, you have to not hang around with the gang members or be involved in antisocial activity, because you're likely going to get arrested. I can't say that blatantly, but that's the type of thing that happens. If you have a very afflicted Rahu in a chart, and you're going through a Rahu period, then you tend to hang out with the wrong side of the people on the tracks, and you end up in prison, that kind of thing. But that's, again, I don't do too many charts like that, but, if I go to the prisons, and, you find a lot of that. Ayurvedically, Rahu creates difficult to treat diseases. If you're in a Rahu period, they might have trouble diagnosing what you have. The same with the Ketu period. Rahu can create a weak immune system, creates problems with pollution, bad dreams, fright, manic depression. Major psychological illnesses are very connected to Rahu. Okay, Gary, any more thoughts? Both of us are experts on Rahu periods.
Rahu. It's relentless. It is relentless, and in a good way sometimes. And that's that charismatic side of it as well, I think. But it is relentless, and you have to be aware of that if you're heading into a Rahu period, a major period for 18 years in particular. If it's a book deal, like just for a couple of years, it's not so bad. It's exciting. There's a lot of thrills and spills, but really it's just never satisfying. That's the thing. It's just a bottomless pit. So the practice always is for any of the malefics, and Rahu is seen as, I know you're saying Mars is first rate, but Rahu obviously is seen as the first rate malefic, the most malefic. And you need to remedy it with Jupiter, the first rate benefic. So Jupiter is all about giving, and giving thanks really is the easiest way. And I heard this from actually a client recently who was just finishing her Rahu 18-year cycle, and she didn't know anything about Rahu through the period, but I was doing her reading at the end of her Rahu coming into Jupiter, and she just developed this intuitively. So she knew herself that to balance this Rahu tendency of just wanting and taking, she had to give as much as she could, and all she could give was thanks. So she was grateful for all the little things she had in her life and the big things. And that's what you have to do with Rahu all the time. You have to sit yourself down and say, okay, this is what I have. I'm thankful for this. And like you say, this is enough. I am enough. I am enough. And just to take time to be and not do, because it's, like I said, relentless. So if you're not like taking those moments where it starts to quieten down a bit, then you're all of a sudden off on a spin again, and it's really tiring. It's increasing vata all the time. So as long as you're, when it's slowing, it's like a roller coaster ride. Everyone talks about it as such. So if you're on a roller coaster, at those times when you get this breather, use it and really squeeze it all, as much of it as you can, until it picks up again and it becomes like this ride that you start to enjoy actually after a while when you get a handle on it.
That was great, Gary. Anybody else want to add anything about Rahu? Okay, let's move on to Jupiter. Everybody loves Jupiter. We're going to get through here. Jupiter. So Jupiter obviously is, again, we're doing the blacks and whites, but Jupiter is particularly strong in Cancer, in Pisces and Sagittarius, connected to friend signs like, Scorpio and Aries, connected to the constellations of Mars, Moon, and the Sun. Very strong in the first house where it has Digbala. Um, 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 and it's happy, obviously, in 1, 2, 4, 7, 10, 5, 9, 11. So Jupiter in general produces a horse. Jupiter is all about expansion, isn't it? Jupiter period is always about expansion. It's actually even about the expansion of the material realm of life. People sometimes think Jupiter is a very spiritual planet, and it is because it governs gurus and religion and things like that. But it is always about the expansion of the material growth, and learning detachment from it. Jupiter periods are connected with festivals and public decorations, material affluence, social eminence. I think when I think of all these philanthropists having these big social gatherings, to raise money, and that's so kind of Jupiterian, putting together these big events to help and honor people and stuff like that. We all love that. Jupiter, material gifts for meritorious deeds, social organizations, philanthropy, um, um, filled with celebration and festival pilgrimages, community religious discourses. Again, this is again our white side. Again, we've got our blacks and whites. Jupiter's, things are always somewhere in between on all these dashas and all these planets. But my affirmation on Jupiter is: I expand my life in celebration and joy and use my gains to help those in need. I expand my life in celebration, joy, and use my gains to help those in need. And that's what Gary was just saying. Jupiter is often an anecdote for Mars and Rahu. By giving and getting out into the community and helping and doing service work, we expand our own joy by helping others. And I think that's always a major lesson of the Jupiter period. Even if it's weak, we have to learn to do that. When Jupiter is unfavorable, it's connected to the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and 12th houses, in my experience. Again, everything is not black and white. There's always exceptions. Marka Sthana. Marka Sthana. So Jupiter has Digbala in the first house, where the guru shines. It has where it has great status in the first house, creates great health and leadership. Everybody loves. My wife has Jupiter in the first house. Everybody loves somebody with Jupiter in the first house. In the third house, Jupiter creates problems because the third house is more about pleasures and fun, and Jupiter, is neat. If you have Jupiter in the third house, you have to balance, make sure that you have enough spirituality to balance it out, because if you go for the pleasure and the fun, then you're not living the full value of Jupiter. I think Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn. It's not real happy in its enemy's house, like Virgo or Gemini or Taurus or Libra or Aquarius, for that matter. So most of the other signs it does pretty well. If Jupiter is kind of weak in the chart, it could take on a superficial level of spirituality or stay stuck in spiritual materialism. probably could write an article about spiritual materialism, but sometimes um, when I lived in Sedona, which is the spiritual material capital of the world for 15 years, and people used to think spirituality was, oh, I'm an expert in aromatherapy. I've got my aroma oils, and I'm very spiritual. But spirituality is obviously about our connection to the divine, and kind of like on some level being aware of your body and helping your emotions with aromatherapy is probably good, but it's kind of the beginning. When I also lived in Sedona, people were into the vortexes, and the vortexes were these magnetic rocks that people would feel their soul shake because they would be on top of a giant magnet on top of a mountain. But that's another example of spiritual materialism. It's kind of like they weren't subtle enough or meditating enough to kind of feel that they had a soul unless they had these giant rocks shake them up. So it's kind of interesting. Um, to me, that's kind of a very kind of weak level of Jupiter. Um, um, even in a Jupiter period, if your Jupiter is weak, Jupiter is a natural benefic. So it's going to bring grace, even if you have like a really bad Jupiter. I mean, sometimes I have a friend who has Jupiter in the 12th house in Pisces, and and Jupiter's a good planet for her. But her Jupiter period's been difficult, but it's kind of like she's always taken care of, and there's always a lid. Expenses don't get out of hand. Somehow, things she's always taken care of. Um, because Jupiter still provides grace as a natural benefic, even if it goes in the 12th house or the 8th house or something like that. Sometimes Jupiter can bring unexpected expenses, unexpected um, gains in life, like in the 8th house. I have Jupiter in the 8th house. I won this $25,000 contest, I was one in a 100 million chance that it happened, but it was the type of thing that happened, because Jupiter's grace was there. So Jupiter's always bringing good things, even when it's unfavorably placed. But sometimes, for certain rising signs, it's you have to watch out for the false optimism of Jupiter. So for Libra, for Gemini and Virgos, they have to be aware of, being too optimistic about relationships. For Libras and Tauruses, they have to watch out for false optimism during a Jupiter period. Ayurvedically, Jupiter obviously, if it's afflicted, can make you overweight. My wife is Libra rising, Jupiter in the first house. Libra and Jupiter are really not friends. She's had a weight problem all her life. Jupiter can create diabetes, cholesterol, weak liver, benign tumors, hormonal imbalances. So that's unfavorable. Okay, Gary, you're on. Jupiter.
Um, oh, I don't know. Jupiter. I got a weak Jupiter. I shouldn't be the one. You shouldn't ask me about Jupiter. I, I don't believe in anything. Um, no, I think when Jupiter is very weak, you have to remedy it, because you need the that energy in your life to overcome all of the other difficulties in life. And without that, and if you don't have something else, in my case, fortunately, I do. I have Venus, which is the other benefic that helps you out. But if you don't have either of those helping you out in some way, you really need to strengthen either of them. Because then when the time period comes along, it's those times in life where if it's not strong naturally in you, you don't get that boost from them. And then the hard times come around again, and you haven't really charged yourself, during those good times or those supposed good times. So Jupiter needs remedying just to give you that extra help in life, I think.
That's brilliant, Gary. Thank you. Gary has such practical wisdom. You really need to get to know him well. He's a really great astrologer. Um,
But again, Barry, sorry to interrupt, but that's because I have a debilitated Jupiter.
yeah, because you're
I
very
have to tell
practical.
it like it is. If it doesn't make sense, if I can't use something I'm being told, I just throw it out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good. I love that. It's also I'm a little bit like that too. I've got Jupiter and Taurus in my Navamsha chart, and so I'm very, my whole website, Applied Vedic Astrology. It's like making astrology practical, so it's really interesting. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. we could go 15 more minutes. I have an appointment in a little bit, but um, how would you like to go 15 more minutes, or should we finish next time? I need a quick show of yes, yes, no, no. You know, I've had too much. I need to digest what I've learned. We could do the other. We still have to do Saturn, K2, and Venus. Any quick? You're also quiet today. You can also hit the chat room and say yes, yes, no, no. More, more, too much, too much. I really need some feedback here. Yes. We got a yes from Marianne. Okay. So we'll do a little bit more because Marianne said yes. And I think we should at least do one more planet. Okay. Okay. Saturn, our favorite Saturn. I'm an expert on Saturn. I'm obsessed with Saturn. I wrote 10 articles for those of you who read my columns. My Saturn is my Atmakaraka. I'm an exalted Saturn aspected by a stationary Jupiter. So I just really know Saturn well. I've learned Saturn lessons quite well. But so Saturn is obviously very strong in Capricorn, Aquarius, exalted in Libra, strong in Taurus, is Venus's sign. Connected to it's particularly good if it's connected to the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th houses. If it has favorable aspects from Jupiter, Venus, or Mercury, so the benefics. So Saturn can get uplifted in your chart. I mean, my Saturn, even though it's in my 12th house, you know, it's got a direct aspect from Jupiter, and it just really uplifts it. So my really bad Saturn qualities have been kind of really uplifted. So Saturn is all about deeper insights into the workings of the divine process. You know, Saturn is by many is considered the most spiritual planet because it takes us, you know, it creates suffering that moves us toward finding our deep inner nature. So sometimes you meet people with, you know, they have great Venus and Jupiter energy in their chart, and they spend all their lives on the beach, you know, and they're wealthy, and you know, if you really talk to them, their lives are kind of, I wouldn't say meaningless, but you know, they're kind of empty, you know, because they, you know, they're involved in, and then you meet. I live in a community where everybody has kind of a strong Saturn influence, and everybody's into meditation and helping the world, and finding, you know, getting out of their suffering, and as a result, that Saturn moves us to kind of search for a higher meaning in life. So it's the most spiritual planet. And so Saturn periods can create suffering, but they always create suffering to move us towards higher spirituality. Saturn, when it's strong, can create pleasure in overseas travel. Saturn being one of the, Saturn and both Rahu are very connected to foreign things. If you have problems with government, your charges might be dropped. If Saturn's really strong in your chart, even though you go through a problem with, if you have problems with taxes or something, then maybe a strong Saturn in the chart, the Saturn period will lead to getting through it. You can get prestige from international organizations in a Saturn period. Again, international is a key word to remember for Saturn. Saturn accelerates spiritual growth, lifting the material veil. We've talked about that. Saturn is about psychological transformation of the individual for spiritual preparation. So again, what does it do? Saturn beats you up. It gives you hard lessons so that you start searching in life. You know, if we didn't suffer, you know, if we're born to a wealthy family and we have all the money in the world and we just live on the beach all the time drinking martinis, you know, we actually get pretty bored after a while. But Saturn kind of wakes us up. It creates problems. It gives us health problems. It gives us money problems. It takes things away sometimes so that we wake up and try to discover our divine nature. And so if we get on a spiritual path early, then Saturn is helpful for us. Saturn is one of these planets that matures in later life. So if you have a Saturn period after you're 36, when Saturn matures, it's not as bad as if you have a Saturn period when you're 18. So Saturn grows with maturity, and it strives to create maturity, right? Saturn is about responsibility. It's about hard work. It's about doing the hard work because it's worth doing the hard work, because something good comes out of it. Saturn is about discipline. One of the things that's come out of my exalted Saturn is that I've always been very disciplined about meditation. Since I was 18, I've meditated twice a day, and I've always been into regular spiritual practice, and that's because Saturn creates discipline, and in a good way. When you're responsible and disciplined, good things come from your life. So my affirmation for Saturn: I trust the process of change and loss and turn my sights on the divine. What happens when Saturn's unfavorable Saturn period? Well, in Aries, it's debilitated, might be canceled, probably is canceled in many people's charts. In Cancer and Leo, I think it's particularly bad because it doesn't like the sun and the moon. In Scorpio, it's in Mars, the sun. I don't think it's particularly good. Saturn is Mahadasha in the first house, which means if you put fear in the head, the way I remember that is Saturn is fear. Saturn governs the base chakra and infrastructure. So Saturn wants to be in, if you're grounded in the base chakra, then you have a lot of money and you're centered and you're grounded, you're connected to the earth, which is the material side of Saturn. When Saturn's in the first house, it's like fear in the head. It's vata, too much vata in the head. So Saturn doesn't like being in the first house, and that to me is one of the most problematic placements in anybody's chart, because it creates health problems. It creates, just way too much anxiety in people's lives. Saturn does well in the 3rd, 6th, and the 11th houses, but it's obviously Saturn's more of a problem when it's afflicted by malefics, by Mars, by Ketu, by Rahu, by the Sun. Those are the really problem affliction aspects that happen. When Saturn's afflicted, it creates abandonment, being forsaken, feeling marooned, emotionally dry, unsupported, creates a lot of fear of the future, loneliness, melancholy. Those are things that a lot of people go through. A lot of people have afflicted Saturns, and even if you have an exalted Saturn, it's afflicted on some level, someplace. I mean, I've certainly been through all of those qualities at some point. Most of our lives, most of our humanity lives about fear in the future. I think what's happening in our world today is, Trump's in power. What's going to happen in the world? The world's going to end. I think it's really this weak Saturn in transit. It's this fear, and fear comes up. You attach it to whatever's going on. If it weren't Trump, it would be something else. But instead of, I always think of Saturn as the mountain, Capricorn, the mountain. It's solid, like a rock. When it's strong, when it's weak, it's like the earthquake. It's shaking. It just doesn't know what's going to happen. It's it's just really kind of a problem. Saturn, when it's afflicting a chart, can create persecution from the state. So it can create legal problems. Maybe tax problems. It can destroy material gifts. And sensual gratification. So Ayurvedically, Saturn is connected to low vitality, weak digestion, constipation, pain, arthritis, tumors, old age when it's afflicted. Affirmation: I am not rushed. I accept delays and setbacks. I work hard and handle my life responsibly. So I think anytime you're in a Saturn period, you have to not rush around. You have to realize that your life, things take more time than you expect. You want it to happen tomorrow. You're in a Saturn period. It's going to take 2 or 3 times as long. I accept delays. Saturn is the tortoise and the hare, right? Slow and steady wins the race. I do it responsibly. I work hard. I get to my goal. I'm not the Mars Rahu person who's going to destroy everybody in the process. I'm just going to go slowly. I'm not rushed. I deal with setbacks. I work hard. I handle my life responsibly. That's Saturn. Okay, Gary, you're on.
Well, I think it's appropriate that Saturn is the last one you're talking about this evening, as it's in many ways the end. And in a Saturn cycle, people reach their end in whatever way that might be, and it's different for everybody. But it's obviously more difficult for people with the difficult Saturn and who are, not set up to deal with that sort of setback and not be patient enough. So Mars types are a good example. Aries and Scorpio just run at life and then they hit a wall. That's a lot more difficult than someone who's more interested in building the wall, for example. So it all depends, I guess, but ultimately, yeah, it is a positive thing ultimately, and it builds structure into your life and a necessary limitation so you can focus on something that's a very practical way of looking at it. But once that thing has been built, or that thing that you imagined becomes a reality, it then can, or there's less opportunity for it to become something else. So, for example, um, the reason why people are really good with Saturn in the seventh in relationships is because they're very responsible and committed, and they stick with that one partner because they're not imagining all these other partners that other people might think are possible. And Saturn says, no, that's not possible. You need to stick with this. So it's that, again, limitation that's very necessary in life, but that feels for some types, for some people, really difficult. And again, it's the Vata Ayurvedic view of it is that, Vata is movement, and Saturn is all about movement, but the issue might be that there's no movement. Whether it's too much movement or no movement, the issue is movement. And life is always moving. We are all dying. This is the thing. So once we accept that movement, then it doesn't feel so hard. It's not. It doesn't feel as tough, I think, with Saturn.
Wow, that's great, Gary. Okay, so closing comments here. We'll have to do Venus and K2 next time. You have the slides for them in the syllabus that I sent, so you can read it through it and we can talk about it more. If Bettina's reminding us, it's up to you. Yeah, Saturn makes it up to us. We have to make our world. That's great, Bettina. Um, um, what's up to you with Saturn? But actually, you're saying it's up to you whether we want to go further. Actually, that's the comment in 403. Okay, so here's where we're at. I have sent you already my 3 tapes on all the rules for dashas, and they take some time to learn, and you need to kind of listen to those tapes a couple times to kind of go through them. So that's 6 hours of material that you can study between now and March 5th when we meet again. And then on March 5th, I mean, the ideal thing that we want to do is we want you to have study this material so that we can workshop it, which means we can do more examples, that we can do practical applications of it rather than learn it. So that's kind of it's been my approach with the class. It hasn't worked. If you do the homework, which is the Saturn responsible thing, then when we can have deeper classes because we can do more examples and I don't have to lecture on all the basic points. And I don't really want to do that again. I kind of want you to kind of really own that material in those 3 tapes that I sent you. And then we can ask questions on it, and then we can workshop it. So that's our goal of our March 5th workshop. But we will continue with our owner's manual for K2 and Venus. And if you haven't spent time learning all the rules for by rising sign, put them on a flashcard over the next 3 weeks. I mean, you just have, and they're subtle rules. I mean, sometimes, like for Sagittarius rising, there's this funny rule that if Jupiter owns 2 cardinal signs, like the first and the fourth, it has some malefic qualities. Well, we don't always think about that. And I find that people with like Sag rising, they're often home builders or home remodelers, and they get into this huge kind of over-optimistic, overextended situation with it, and that's kind of how its malefic quality kind of manifests. But you have to kind of think about all these kind of subtle things about the rising signs. And I probably should do a videotape on this material and put it on YouTube or something, but I don't know. I'm kind of one of these people that doesn't like to just put out like hours and hours of videotapes, on YouTube for the public. But I think it's something that you really have to own all this stuff. So I'm going to take some final questions, and then I have to finish some preparation for a 5 o'clock meeting. The Saturn Rahu period is not giving me any rest. I really want you all to thank Gary for coming today, and I'm hoping he'll come back. Um, Please give it up for Gary, who really a wonderful astrologer, and he's writing a book on dashas, and so it's really great that he could join us today. And I'm going to unmute you so that you can thank Gary. And do you have any final thoughts on anything?
No, Barry, just wanted to thank you for inviting me along and really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I hope to connect with you again in March.
Okay, great. It'd be great if you could come back, because I mean, I think it's probably good support for your Dasha book too. So,
yes.
yeah.
So thank you both very much. It's a very nice class.
Okay, it's Bettina, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
That's Bettina. Yes. Hi.
Very
Sorry,
nice.
I was muted very early when I came on, and I didn't notice.
Okay.
I said hello, but I realized I muted myself before.
Okay. Good
So thank you very much.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I was just checking my email. You mentioned you sent 3 recordings.
Yeah,
I didn't
I
receive.
think you didn't get those. Okay. Did everybody else get
No.
them? Because I asked my office manager to send them out. I can have them send them out again. I'll make sure you guys get them again.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, the 3 2-hour lectures I did in my financial astrology class, but it was basically introduction to dashas, and whether it was for country charts or people's charts, you still had to know all the rules. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other final comments? Okay, guys, so I will send you this videotape. You've got 3 works to study hard, and you can email me. I will be around, obviously the next 3 weeks, but I'm just, I wanted you to have some integration time, which I didn't put into the other class. Okay, guys, take care. Bye, Gary. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Barry. Bye.